From 6 till 10, it's Patrick Berry.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
April edition. The music in the background are the Schuyler Sisters from the hit Broadway musical Hamilton, which comes to the Bushnell this year. So we decided to start the program today talking with Paul Marte, who is the communications person at the Bushnell, who lets everybody in the world know what their Broadway series is. And good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing very well.
You've announced your new Broadway series for next year, and there's like excitement on the streets. But you still have 2 shows to go this year and a summer show. So it used to be that Broadway was like between September and May at the Bushnell, and now it's year-round.
Depending on the year, absolutely. We've had this is the 3rd year in a row that we have a summer offering. And I think this year with Lion King coming back in August, it'll be a little more successful than we had If Then and Finding Neverland the past 2 years, and they didn't do as well as we had liked. But Lion King has already sort of gone through the roof, as you would expect, and still plenty of tickets left. But by the time we get to August in the run, it'll be a tight ticket.
And most of the shows play for a week, but Lion King is there for quite a while. Is it one of the bigger shows, technically, that's come into the Bushnell?
Yeah, it takes a couple of days anyway to put in, which is unusual for a show. Usually they will leave their previous venue on a Sunday night. They'll travel all night. They'll arrive here sometime on a Monday, and by Monday afternoon start putting the show in. And by Tuesday night, they'll be ready to go. And sometimes it's even tighter than that. But certain shows, Wicked, Lion King, are still big enough that they require multi-day put-ins. And that will shrink as time goes on. Believe me, in 10 years, there will be a Wicked that will be able to load in one day and play for a week or a split week somewhere.
Well, I read somewhere in a magazine, and it was actually a magazine about commercial aviation, that the Lion King played in Honolulu, and it took 2 747s to load the sets, the costumes, the technical people, and the cast, and get them from the mainland to Hawaii. Lion King must have tons of trucks and buses and all of that just to bring people here.
Yeah, I don't know how many trucks, but some of these shows we have 2 loading docks, which each have 2 bays, so that can accommodate 4 trucks. But sometimes shows will come in, and along Trinity Street here in Hartford, you will see a show have 4, 5, 6 more trucks besides the ones that they have in our loading dock. So lots of these productions they do now. Shows that go on tour are the Broadway production. It's not a cut down version of Broadway. It's not redesigned. It is the exact same quality of what you see on Broadway, and to replicate that can take a lot of moving parts, a lot of people, and a lot of trucks.
Now, after The Lion King, let's say before The Lion King, actually, 2 shows en route. One, according to the theater newspapers in the last few days, has Broadway aspirations, and that is the sequel to The Phantom of the Opera, and I believe it's called Love Never Dies.
Love Never Dies. We sing it here in the office all the time. It drives my boss crazy. We go, Love Never Dies. I am one of the few people in the world who have never seen Phantom of the Opera. So they brought us down to see Love Never Dies in Fort Lauderdale last year when it was playing there. So I didn't have really any context other than knowing about Phantom of the Opera. So I saw this sequel to Phantom of the Opera without a huge background in the characters, but it was so captivating. And so it is such a theatrical show. It is over the top. You have to sort of go in and suspend disbelief. You have to go in wanting a big theater experience. And most people I talk to that have seen Phantom say, yes, if you're a Phantom fan, you are going to like Love Never Dies. I loved it, not just because it's my job to say so.
Well, now that you've seen Love Never Dies, did you go back and see Phantom of the Opera, or are you still waiting?
You know, we go for Broadway League Conference next month to New York, and I think I may see Phantom in New York when I'm there. I didn't get to see it when it was here in Connecticut, but I think I may see it on Broadway when I go in next month.
I remember seeing it at the Bushnell, and I believe the Bushnell had some renovations done right before the tour came. And to see that chandelier crash from the ceiling of the Bushnell down to the orchestra, which is the special effect that everybody knows about Phantom, was just so exciting.
Yes, yeah. I know that was before my time here, but they had to do the renovation to load Phantom in. As these shows we talked about at the top have been getting bigger and bigger. Not every theater was able to house the original tour of Phantom, so now we can house pretty big tours here.
Well, now that you mentioned renovation and big shows, is the Bushnell, compared to other theaters that these shows tour to, is it one of the bigger theaters, or is it one of the smaller theaters?
It's sort of a medium-sized theater, medium to large in terms of seating capacity. And in terms of load-in space and whatnot, it's relatively average. We can get almost any show in here at this point, any Broadway touring show.
Did shows ever come to the Bushnell and try out? We're talking about Love Never Dies, possibly going to New York. At least their producers have aspirations of that. Was the Bushnell ever a tryout theater like the Schubert in New Haven or some of the theaters in Boston?
You know, I don't think it was. I remember those days because I was living in Boston when shows would still try out in Boston or New Haven, and I remember I saw Dreamgirls before it went to Broadway in Boston when it was trying out there. No, and we actually would love to be one of the cities sometimes when you're the first city on a tour. The show will come in tech for a week or two, and it's a great thing to have that in your market. So I know our folks in the programming department are always pitching, hey, would you want to start the tour in Hartford? But many shows start their tours on the West Coast for various reasons before they get to the East Coast. So that's rare, too. But I don't think Hartford was known as a tryout city.
It's too bad because the theater is absolutely gorgeous, and it seems that it's so close to New York City that, you know, the producers, when they try a show out, want to be far enough away that the people aren't they're not prejudging a show based on what they've heard, and it's close enough away that producers can jump on the train and run up and see something. I would think the Bushnell is in prime location for that.
Yeah, but the whole sort of model of where shows come from has changed over the years. So now you do find that happening at Hartford Stage, which has sent Anastasia to Broadway and Gentleman's Guide, and I think they had aspirations for a couple other shows. So you find that happening more now in regional theater, or a show will have an extended tryout in New York, extended preview period, but you don't have as much shows being mounted for Broadway, but starting out in a larger presenting house somewhere else. That's very rare these days.
So we got The Lion King this summer, and we've got Love Never Dies this spring. And then after that, a show that was just so hot in New York, the story of Gloria Estefan and the Miami Sound Machine.
I have my tickets already.
Yeah. Peter, our engineer, has been talking about On Your Feet for weeks and weeks. So I'm actually excited about that because I was working in Miami when the Miami Sound Machine was like the hottest local group, and I remember several times, going to an event, and they were like the opening act for somebody, and I love their music.
Yeah, and you get that whole story in the show. I loved it as well. Saw it in New York last year, and I love Gloria Estefan's music, and it's really her love story with Amelia Estefan and how the Miami Sound Machine came to be and that whole sound. And then she had the bus accident and her recuperation from that. So it's a great aspirational story, and all that wonderful Gloria and Amelia Estefan music. Miami Sound Machine. It's a really, really fun show.
Does it have a lot of dance?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes, as you can imagine. It's very dancey music.
Okay, you should probably tell people, since we're talking here about Broadway and the Bushnell, how to get information on the upcoming season and where tickets are available.
Always the best place for any information and ticket purchases is our website, which is bushnell.org. It's the only authorized seller of tickets for shows that come here, so it's always the best place to start. And also, I encourage everybody to sign up for our e-club. We don't spam you, we don't sell your information to anyone, but you get first updates on everything that's coming, and usually our e-club will get what we call an ATO, or advanced ticket offer, so they get a chance. If you're on the e-club, you'll get a code where you can buy tickets to shows before the general public when they're going on sale. So it will not be a pain in your inbox, I promise, but you'll get the latest information and advanced ticket offers if you join our e-club.
Now, the show that everybody's talking about and has been for the last few years is Hamilton, and you're bringing it in for the holiday series, holiday season. But you've got a whole bunch of new shows and revivals coming. This Broadway series is just loaded next year.
Yeah, we're trying to not make it all about Hamilton, and because this is attracting a lot of new people to the Bushnell and to Broadway, and to series tickets and subscriptions here. So we want to make sure the next few years are not like, oh, we did Hamilton and nothing else that's good. It's really, the rest of the season is quite amazing, starting with The Play That Goes Wrong, which is currently the longest-running play on Broadway. The longest-running play currently on Broadway, and it's an amazing comedy. I have not yet seen it, but everyone I know that has seen it, I've not heard one negative thing about it. So it is tons of fun, and that opens our season in September. Then we have the recent revival of Fiddler on the Roof. That was on Broadway, and that has gone on tour, and we have that in November. And then, as you mentioned, Hamilton coming up for the most of the month of December. We have it for 3 weeks, which is great.
And is Hamilton a big show?
Yes, Hamilton is a big show. So I don't know if you've seen it. It's a turntable show, and it actually has 2 turntables involved, and that will also be on the road. And those are always big shows to put in.
Yeah, I was wondering, because I know that Hamilton plays multi-week runs in the on its tour, and I just wasn't sure whether that was because it was such a box office hit or whether it was technically a very difficult show.
You know, it is primarily because it's a big Broadway hit, but it only has one set, but it does have those concentric turntables. And one staircase that moves, but there's not a lot of theater magic that goes on. There's absolutely gorgeous lighting, and the turntable effects that they do are wonderful. But it's not. It doesn't seem to be a huge fancy set, but it's extremely effective.
And oddly enough, the set design for that, David Corrins, is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. So there's a little local connection.
Very nice. Good to know.
So the new year, Hamilton ends the current year, and the new year brings just a revival of Cats and The Sound of Music and the 20th anniversary of Rent and more.
Yeah. Cats and Sound of Music, along with Beautiful and Lion King, are all off subscription. They are just favorites that we're bringing back and sort of adding to the glamour of our season. But the series continues with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in February, which was recently on Broadway. And it looks like a really fun show. Everyone knows the story. This is closer to the book than it is to the movie. So if you've read the book, I think this will be a very satisfying experience for you. And then the 20th anniversary production of Rent, which I think is playing somewhere in Connecticut right now, but it's coming back, and we have it at the Bushnell in March next year. And I've never seen Rent, so I'm very excited about this. It's one of those shows, along with shows like Chorus Line or now Hamilton, that really changed people's perception of Broadway. It sort of ushered in a new era, and it seems like we have a show like that about every 10 years, and Hamilton is this decade's game changer.
Yeah, and Rent has its roots in the opera, in the world of opera, because it is a modernization of La Boheme, and written by a really incredible young composer who regrettably died while the show was in previews. So we never will know whether this Jonathan Larson, who created Rent, what he could have brought subsequently to the theater. But Rent is just a milestone on so many levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have series Come From Away, which won the Tony last year. And people are very excited about that. I'd say they're almost as excited about that as they are about Hamilton coming, because we're getting it relatively early in the tour, and it's just such an uplifting story of the events after 9/11 on this tiny town of Gander in Newfoundland, and the planes that were grounded and the people of Gander who took in folks that were stranded traveling and were in Newfoundland until planes were flying again, and how the town came together and took people in. It's a wonderful, wonderful story.
I actually saw that in a pre-Broadway version, and I was so moved by it because it really, you want to think about 9/11 and the positive things that came out of it after you see a show like this, which really stresses how people can be so good to other people in a time of trouble.
Absolutely.
And it had a workshop production at Goodspeed several years before it went to Broadway. I saw it in Washington, D.C. when it was kind of morphing into what it became in New York. And Washington has become, like New England, a birthplace of future shows, because Come From Away came through there, and then Dear Evan Hansen also did its pre-Broadway tryout in D.C.
Yeah, it's amazing that these regional theaters that are really the seeding Broadway with the future hits. That's sort of how they're being developed today.
Now, I know you guys plan years out to bring certain shows in, and a show like Hamilton, you probably had your hands on a couple of years ago. When you look at what's playing on Broadway right now, are there shows that you're really interested in bringing to Hartford in next year or the year after or the year after that?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a safe bet that you'll be seeing Dear Evan Hansen here within a couple of years. There's a good chance that Mean Girls, that just opened, will be coming to Bushnell also in the next couple of years. We're looking at, I know, Escape to Margaritaville, which didn't get the best reviews, but everyone, again, I know that has seen it. It's the Jimmy Buffett musical. It is just so much fun. And I also think Anastasia, which started at Hartford Stage and moved to Broadway, I think that is pretty much a safe bet for the Bushnell in the next couple of seasons.
It'll be interesting to see if Anastasia does come to the Bushnell. It'll be interesting to see how it got expanded physically from when it was at Hartford Stage in a small space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was surprisingly, I don't know if you saw Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder at Hartford Stage and then on Broadway on a tour, but it didn't change all that much physically. It got a little bit bigger, but the aesthetic was there from the beginning.
And it happens to be a personal favorite of mine. I just I can't wait to see it again in Hartford, so I don't have to drive down to New York.
Yeah. That is nice. It's a nice part of having the Bushnell right here in
it is.
The middle of the state.
So the Bushnell is open year-round. It has some great Broadway, and you can get information at their website, which is bushnell.org. And we've been talking with Paul Marte this morning from the Bushnell. And, Paul, thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you at an opening of Love Never Dies in a couple of weeks.
Wonderful.
And
thank you for having me.
And hopefully during the summer, when Artsbeat Radio goes back to a weekly basis, maybe you'll chat with us about The Lion King, and we'll get to chat when it's not like wintry outside.
I would love to do that.
Okay. Thanks again, Paul Marte from the Bushnell. We're going to take a break to thank and acknowledge some of our underwriters. When we come back, we'll be talking with Chris Roman, who many of you know as the arts writer and the theater writer for the Valley Advocate, but he's also a stage director, and he is directing the world premiere of a musical based on Molière's Tartuffe at Silverthorne Theater. Later on in the program, we'll be talking with Ilona Samogi, who is the costume designer for the Will Rogers Follies, which is currently running at Goodspeed Musicals. And since it's school vacation week, if you're looking for shows to attend, The Age of Innocence is an absolutely beautiful production of an Edith Wharton story at Hartford Stage, and The Legend of Georgia McBride is one of the funniest comedies with music ever at Theater Works in Hartford. I'm Mark Auerbach. This is ArtsBeat Radio on 89.5 FM WSKB. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, and we'll be right back.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Wally Computer Associates, one of the largest technology providers in North America. Headquartered in Southwick, Wally provides all of the products and services that you'd expect from a world-class technology partner to schools, colleges, businesses, as well as state and local governments and agencies. Wally Computer Associates, meeting all of your technology needs. On the web at WCA.com.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Comcast and Xfinity.com, offering Xfinity TV, Internet, home phone, and home security services. Information on all that Xfinity has to offer in the Westfield area is available online at Xfinity.com.
We thank the generosity of our underwriters. For more information, please contact the Westfield State Foundation at 413-572-8646.
Wednesday mornings from 6 till 8, it's Tina Gorman with Wake Up Wednesday.
Community Radio
89.5 WSKB. Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to ArtsBeat Radio. I'm Mark Auerbach with Peter Coles here in the studio. And some good news. After our May ArtsBeat Radio, we will return to a weekly basis beginning Memorial Day weekend on Fridays from 8 to 9 every Friday morning through the summer and beyond. So I hope that you'll share that news with your friends, and we're starting to line up great guests for upcoming programs. With us now, Chris Roman, who is not only the theater reporter for the Valley Advocate, who I tend to wave to or say a quick hi to at every opening night. We cover a lot of the same shows. But Chris is also a theater director and is directing a world premiere of a musical based on Molière's Tartuffe at the Silverthorne Theater Company in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Now, Silverthorne is here for its 5th season. It was founded by two people from Northfield Mount Herman School, Lucinda Kidder and David Rowland, and their first season took place at the Rhodes Arts Center at Northfield Mount Herman, a theater that I'm very familiar with because I went to high school there. And then they moved to Greenfield, and they've done some really extraordinary theater in the northern part of the valley. They're worth taking a drive up I-91 to check out some of the things that they do. Chris is on board to direct this world premiere musical, which is running through the weekend. It already has opened. Good morning, Chris.
Hey, Mark. It's nice to have more than a couple minutes chat with you. We usually pass in the night, as you said.
We do. And you've been, I was thinking about it driving into the station this morning. I was working at Stage West when you and I met, and you were a reporter at The Advocate. So you've been covering theater in the area for probably 30 years.
Probably more than 30 years. Yes. And it's such a great place to be doing this kind of theater work, both as a director and as a critic. It's a comparatively small area, but it is so vibrant and just overflowing with talent and productions and and community spirit as well, in a very professional kind of atmosphere. I'm blessed to be able to do this.
I feel that way always, too. And I know that you and I don't always cover the same shows or the same theaters, but we are so lucky to have a wealth of theater within an hour's drive in either direction. And we're talking professional theater and experimental theater, and the colleges here do really good work as well.
Indeed. I think it's probably an indication of the wealth of opportunity here that neither of us can get to see everything we want to see.
I realize that. I look at my calendar and I think if I don't have enough days in the week to see all the stuff that I want to see, and I have a day job, so it makes theater going kind of tough if I were doing it 7 days a week.
Right. Although I do know people who do it during the summer.
Yeah, during the summer it feels like that. I'm glad this is sort of like a slightly slower time of the year. Right. How did you get involved with Silverthorne, and how did this world premiere come to them and to you?
Well, I got involved with Silverthorne last year when I brought to them the idea for a production of Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris, that classic cabaret of the great French-Belgian songwriter's oeuvre, his works. And we did it in what is now called the Hawks and Reed Performing Arts Center in Greenfield, which is kind of the hub of Greenfield's renaissance as a cultural hub. And there's a wonderful performance space up on the 4th floor of that old building. And we did Jacques Brel there with a 4-member cast, and the house set up as a cafe, a bistro in Paris, where the thing takes place. And so this year, I was approached by Silverthorne and the composer, author, lyricist of Tartuffe, which I should mention is spelled Tar2F, because it's kind of a second iteration of Moliere's classic. So Jeff brought that production, that script and score, to Silverthorne, and the success they'd had with Jacques Brel encouraged them to take a chance with another musical up there, another small-scale musical, although this one has a cast of 10 and 2 instrumentalists just off stage. So I was glad to participate in this new one as well. And it's been an exciting and so far very successful, sold-out production up there.
A lot of people don't realize how long it takes to bring a production to fruition. How long ago did you see the script, and how long did you ponder over how you were going to stage and direct it to the point that you started rehearsals?
Well, Jeff Olmsted started working on it, I think, 10 years ago, and did a kind of staged reading when he was living in Ohio at Cincinnati. I saw another staged reading of another version of it a couple of years ago that they did in Northampton, and gave Jeff voluminous notes on my take on it. I was very excited by it. I thought that it had real potential, and I guess those notes had something to do with my being approached to direct this. We rehearsed it for only 6 weeks, part-time, that is, only in the evenings, because most of the cast, although they are local professionals, also, like you, have day jobs. And I realized late in the process that we had given it about as much rehearsal time as you would give to a normal non-musical production. But this was not only a musical, but a world premiere, which was in development while we were rehearsing it. So the fact that it's come out pretty okay is very pleasing to me, and a tribute to the cast and the crew.
Have you continued to refine it since it opened, or when it opened that was it in terms of adding things and tweaking things?
Well, since it opened, the script and the score have stayed the same. The staging has stayed basically the same. We've tweaked a couple of little staging things where people weren't in the light, and where I wanted to just give a note on, well, just move a little more stage right before you exit, that kind of thing. But for the most part, it's the same show. It'll be the same show this weekend as it was on opening night, except that another thing that I've been thrilled by is the cast is so connected to the show and to their characters that almost all of them every night are adding little details into their reactions and interactions on stage, which makes the show so organic and so dynamic. It's really thrilling to watch.
How does going back and directing a show and putting yourself on stage and all that, how does that refine your eye when you go back to writing about theater and observing other people's work? Does it change your perspective?
Well, yes, and it kind of works both ways. I was invited to direct when I was teaching criticism at PVPA, the Performing Arts Charter School in South Hadley. And that was my first opportunity to direct, and I've been doing it ever since because it's my favorite thing to do. And I kind of learned how to direct by watching thousands of productions and sitting there and saying, now, why is this working? Or even more important, why isn't this working? And if I were directing it, what would I do to fix a failed production, for instance? And so when I came into directing, it was kind of instinctive, but based on a lot of secondhand, if you will, experience. And then I've kind of learned on the job. I've been doing it for 15 years now. And so certainly it works both ways. The being familiar with the intricacies of making a production, putting it on, creating it, working with the actors, certainly gives me insight as a critic into what it takes to make a show work.
How many shows do you have time to direct over the course of a year?
Well, I see more than 100 plays a year, so my other time is kind of limited, but I jump at the chance to direct a show if it's offered and if it's exciting to me. If I feel like that 60 hours of rehearsal plus twice as much in preparation is going to be, I don't want to put it this way, but worth my time because everybody gives so much to a production, and actors certainly included, that it makes sense to be involved in a production that you really, really care about and want to give your all to. So to answer your question, I direct. There was one year where I directed 7 plays, and I looked back on that and had to sit down. But it's usually a couple of shows a year.
What will happen to Tartuffe after it's run at Silverthorne? Are people looking at it for subsequent productions? Will it be revised again? Is there interest in taking it elsewhere?
There's no active interest in taking it elsewhere. Jeff is certainly interested in developing it further and taking it to the big time. A couple of people I've spoken to after performances have said, I think this show could go to New York. So we're certainly looking at that.
And Silverthorne Theater, you have worked with them twice, and you covered them. And they're really one of the up-and-coming theaters in the Valley. Are there some other theaters that we should be paying attention to that you think are bringing a new style of theater to the Valley in different ways?
Well, the one there's 2 that really strike me. One is called Real Live Theater, and it's a group of comparatively young people who came out of Serious Play Ensemble Theater, which has been going for years and is still doing tremendous, exciting work. And Real Live Theater does very interesting stuff, a lot of new work. In fact, this weekend they're doing a stage reading of a new play based on The Taming of the Shrew, which is kind of from Catherine the Shrew's point of view, a feminist take, if you will, on Shakespeare's very controversial comedy.
That could be fascinating, particularly in light of the Me Too movement. When you take a look at Kiss Me Kate or Taming of the Shrew, you have to look at them in a new way.
Well, interesting you should mention that, because Tartuffe is, 350 years old, but it just keeps getting more and more relevant. It's about a con man who weasels his way into the home of a devout, wealthy Parisian man under the guise of being this pious Puritan, with designs on his benefactor's fortune, his wife, and everything else. And it's a satire on religious hypocrisy and pious greed, but there's also a Me Too moment in the play that Molière wrote into his version, and we're certainly not shying away from it, where Tartuffe wants to seduce the wife of this good man, and he's found out by the wife pretending to seduce him and then unmasking him. So it's a kind of Me Too moment where the predator gets his comeuppance.
How modern is the musical based upon the original Molière? Is it the script pretty much the same, or has it been updated?
This play takes place in 1664 on the opening night of Tartuffe. He's added some of the original, Jeff has added some of the actual history of the play, where it was given one performance and then banned because religious hypocrites didn't like it. But he's adapted the script from Molière, updated the language. There's some contemporary anachronistic asides, that kind of thing. But it's in full period costumes, fabulous costumes by Reba Jean, and a lovely set by John Iverson. So it's kind of period, but updated in its not only its relevance, of course, but in its style. And the music, just wonderful, tuneful music, is also has a kind of harpsichord sound, but also has a kind of modern Broadway feel. The real melange of that.
We should probably tell people that if you're interested in learning about Tartuffe and the Silverthorne Theater, their website is Silverthorne, and that's THORNE, theater spelled ER.org. And is it sold out, or are there tickets still remaining for the weekend?
Tickets are still available for the weekend, as far as I know, but as a result of the first weekend's performance, they are pretty much flying out the door. So I would encourage anybody who wants to come and see it to get online and book now.
So, Chris, what's on your agenda now that you're done directing Tartuffe? Is there another play, Irons in the Fire, or are you going back to reporting?
I am recovering from Tartuffe and taking it easy and gearing up for the summer program, which is as exciting as ever. So I don't have any directing irons in the fire at the moment, because during the summer I spend most of my nights out in the field at local theaters and in the Berkshires.
Before we run off for an underwriting break, is there any particular play in the upcoming summer season that has you really excited? I look at the menu of what's out there, and I could fill up every night of the week.
Well, I will tell you the truth, Mark. I get the press releases from the theater companies for the summer, and I look them over and I say, wow, that looks interesting. Boy, this company's program is really fascinating. Gee, I can hardly wait to see that. And then I put them away, and when people ask me the question that you just asked me, I say, wow, there's so much in my inbox, and I can't remember any of them.
Exactly.
I will tell you that next week or the week after, I think it might be May 3rd, there's a staged reading of a play called The Virgin Trial, which is the next in the series of plays that Wham Theater out in the Berkshires is staging. They did this play called The Last Wife, which was about Catherine Parr, the wife of Henry VIII who survived. And this one is about the teenagehood of Elizabeth I, and it's very, very contemporary, very updated. Again, like Tartuffe, takes place in the period, but the language is very contemporary, and the writing is fascinating, and they're doing a stage reading of this next play out at Shakespeare and Company in May. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's on my calendar as well.
Great.
Chris Roman, thanks for joining us. Chris directs Tartuffe, a brand new musical at the Silverthorne Theater. We're going to take an underwriting break. We'll be back with Ilona Samogi, who is the costume designer for the Will Rogers Follies at Goodspeed, so don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Commercial Distributing Company of Westfield. Now in its third generation of family ownership, Commercial is one of the premier beverage distributors of Western Massachusetts. The Plasek family and the staff of Commercial Distributing wishes you good times throughout the year and urges you to drink responsibly. We thank the generosity of our underwriters. For more information, please contact the Westfield State Foundation at 413-572-8646.
It's Tuesday morning from 6 till 8. Wow, it's Tuesday with Bob Plass.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
I can feel. Welcome back, everyone. This is Mark Auerbach. You're listening to Artsbeat Radio here on WSKB. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. Our May show coming up, we'll be talking with the folks from the North Hall Festival in Huntington, Massachusetts, which presents a series of music, both folk and jazz. They have some theater, they have some opera, and they present at the North Hall in Huntington, which I understand is a historic old building.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it does. And then we'll be chatting with Kevin Rhodes, who's the maestro of the Springfield Symphony. And the Springfield Symphony Orchestra will be celebrating its 75th season next year. So he's going to give us a preview of some of the programming that he's planning for the upcoming year, which should be kind of exciting. 75 years is a long time. Earlier, we had one of the Artsbeat, we had talked with the folks from, actually, when we did the Westfield News Show, we had the Berkshire Theater people on.
Correct. Yeah.
It's their 90th, and that's a super milestone in theater. 75 for an orchestra is a big deal. So we'll be talking with them. And then some of you may remember the production of $1 Million Quartet at Berkshire Theater last summer.
I remember it very well.
Wasn't that a great show?
Yes.
That was so great. And James Barry directed that. And he's an actor who has been involved with $1 Million Quartet, not only as a performer, but a music director and a stage director. But he's been an actor who's done a lot of area theater. He lives in Williamstown, and he will be starring in shows this summer at the Chester Theater and also Berkshire Theater Group. And he has a new recording coming out, and he posted to Facebook maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago a sound snippet from one of the songs he was working on. And I was like, I had to download it immediately, Peter, because it was so good. So I asked James if he
nice little teaser.
Yeah. I asked James if he would come on to Artsbeat Radio and talk about his music. And usually people say, well, talk about the show you're doing at Chester, or talk about the show you're doing at Berkshire Theater, or what it's like to co-star with your wife. His wife is Tara Franklin, who is one of the best regional actors around. And Tara starred in the Edward Albee play last summer at Berkshire Theater. And he said, but people don't ask me to talk about my music, so we're going to get him on board.
Well, it's always a little bit of a different side of somebody. It's always cool to see that they're great on stage, but they also have a different interest. It's kind of fun to look at somebody outside of the box.
It is. And so I'm looking forward to that May show. And then when we go on into the weekly return of Artsbeat Radio at the end of May, and that'll be on Friday mornings, and we'll be here every Friday from 8 to 9, and then through the summer, and then continue on during the year. I'm really hoping to get a combination of people that are doing great things in the theater around here or in music, but also to get some of the people who you may know as an actor who have a performance career also as musicians. And at the end of the program today, we're going to play a snippet of music from a new group called the Highline Vocal Jazz. And it's interesting, Peter, because I follow, I've got a lot of friends on Facebook who are arts people, and they tend to post things. And this woman I had been with at Connecticut Ballet, Elizabeth Fleming, was a young dancer when I was working for the company. And we sort of stayed in touch on and off over the years. And she posted a music video in which her son, who was involved in music at UConn, his name is Jared Gravely, and he was about to graduate, and he posted a video of an a cappella group he was working with. And she was a proud mom putting this out there and all that. And I'm watching this music, and first of all, these guys are terrific. They were doing a traditional Christmas song, and I looked, and one guy looked really, really familiar, and I kept looking, and then I wrote her back. I said, "Who's the tall guy?" And she said, "Well, his name is Chester Martin, and he was an actor at Connecticut Repertory Theater Company, and I've covered Chester Martin in several shows in the last 3 years."
Okay.
He was over the top good in the Laramie Project, and when I picked the best performances of that year, I picked him as one of the better performers. Then I saw him in Spamalot, and then I saw him in How to Succeed the summer before last, and he was very familiar. He's the tall guy in this a cappella quintet. So they had a YouTube page, and I went and looked at the YouTube page, and sure enough,
now you're digging into it a little bit further.
Yeah,
right?
I'm watching it. So I wanted to end the program today with a snippet of their music. They're called the Highline Vocal Jazz. I really think they're going to go places, and I watched it because there's an actor who I would never expect to be doing a cappella music, let alone the type of music that they do. They do a cover of Michael Jackson. They do a cover of Al Green. They do some really good jazz kind of things, and then they do traditional Christmas music.
I love stuff like that. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Tufts Beelzebubs for the same thing, just that sound. I love the sound of that. Hearing all those different parts of music, all those different types of singers, baritones and altos, and all getting together and just providing that harmony. I love it.
Yeah. We've had trouble connecting with Ilona Samogi this morning, who's the costume designer for the Will Rogers Follies. That's why Peter and I are just kind of chatting here. But it is school vacation week here in Western Mass. And if you're looking for shows, there are 3 worth your while. Actually, I'll say there are 4. One is this production Tartuffe that Chris Roman just talked about. And that's in Greenfield. But down at Goodspeed Musicals, the Will Rogers Follies is a new production of a musical that won the Tony Award back in 1991. It's the story of the famous radio guy, humorist, vaudevillian, Ziegfeld Folly star Will Rogers, who many people know about, whose career was ended abruptly when he and Wiley Post flew to Alaska on an exploration and their plane crashed. I think he was in his early 30s when he passed. But Will Rogers was a legend in his time, and this musical, which was staged originally on Broadway by Tommy Tune and won Tony Awards for Best Musical, Best Score, Best Performances, Best Choreography, was a stunning look at the life of Will Rogers as though it was presented as a Ziegfeld Follies. So it has the chorus girls and the elaborate costumes. It has the song and the dance. And it starts out where Will Rogers is a cowboy in Oklahoma, and he wants to go off and see the world, and he goes to the Argentine, but he comes back, and one of the things he's really good at is rope tricks, and he ends up doing vaudeville. Then he's noticed by the Ziegfeld Follies, and he does a little chit-chat, kind of like impromptu, like we're doing right now, before his rope tricks. I can't do rope tricks.
Neither can I, so don't feel bad.
I can't do rope tricks. But anyway, he became a social commentator of the day and a humorist, and eventually ran for president.
I didn't know. Maybe I did hear that somewhere along the way.
And it didn't matter to him. Party lines were not important. He said the Republicans were going to obviously win, and the Democrats were going to obviously party. So it didn't make a difference which side you were on, because you were either winners or party goers. And either way, it was a good thing. And anyway, this show is quite the show, and it deserves a revival, and Goodspeed is doing that. And David Lutkin, who is the star and been brought in to do it, was in the original production of the Will Rogers Follies.
No kidding.
But beyond that, he's also a singer who's impersonated Woody Guthrie and done shows about American folk music, and he has his own band. He and his own band will be performing at Barrington Stage this summer, but he's starring in Will Rogers at Goodspeed. And if you go online, particularly if you're on Facebook and you bring up the Goodspeed Musicals page on Facebook, they have a couple of video clips of a dress rehearsal. And when you see that little stage in East Haddam, Connecticut, and you see what they can do, and the music and the songs and the dances and everything else, it really is a phenomenal.
I think we have our guest now.
Yeah, I think you do.
Well, good morning, Ilona.
Good morning. Hi.
I had a million questions to ask you, so we've got to condense it down to like 3 minutes.
I can let you go over a little bit.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes.
So we're going to go over just a tad here. But first of all, you've directed in New York. You've directed in designed in New York, designed in regional theaters. You designed for ice shows. What's the challenge of the Will Rogers Follies?
Well, the challenges are many, but I guess volume is one of the biggest challenges. I think just because the sheer number of musical acts in it, there are, I don't even know, it's like eight big production numbers. So it was just exhausting to get all the clothes on all those dancers and all the leads. And I think we had about last count I had is 130, but I think it got higher than that, and I've just been afraid to really count it. 130 costumes. So that is probably the hugest challenge for a show like this. And also with this particular production, the original Broadway production was so iconic as far as costumes go, that we really reconceived the entire thing. We just sort of started from like zero and built our own design for the show instead of relying on tropes that were used before. So that was kind of a challenge too, because Willa Kim was an absolute genius and a true artist in the field. So, it was like riding a fine line. Like, I don't want to disavow or, say what she did was not good or right for the show, but to like really come up with something that was truly original.
How much time did you have to design the show? I know it's a huge costume show, and I was telling people before, the video clips that are on Facebook that Goodspeed has put up, you just see the depth of the costumes and how many. How much time did you have to figure this one out?
Not too much time to do the sketching and the researching. Our first design meeting was in September, and then the sketches needed to be ready by sort of mid-late November. So it was condensed, as far as getting all the research and sort of developing all the ideas and actually sitting down and drawing everything. But then since then, we've actually been in the process of getting them like into a physical state and on stage, and that is, oh gosh, that is like 85% of the design work is what happens after the sketches are turned in. You have to source every single fabric, every single shoe, every single hack. There's so many things that go together, and all of that takes a lot of legwork and a lot of time to find all those bits and pieces that come together to make a whole. So the designing is ongoing.
Once the show goes into rehearsal, do you have to redesign it based on the movement of the dancer or the way an actor moves so that those costumes stay fluid?
Sometimes, Fortunately, Kelly Barkley, who is the genius choreographer working on this production, and her work really is amazing. And I sort of have a sympathetic feeling about bodies and clothes and sort of mood of what is the feeling that we're trying to create with the clothes and the movement, and we really sort of are on the same page a lot of the time. So it's been a lot of sort of happiness. We haven't struggled too much. Certainly some actors show up and they're very different than you expect, and some accommodations might be necessary, but it's usually not heartbreaking or difficult to accomplish. Like our lead, David, is incredibly tall, and I really couldn't see that in the photographs, but he's 6'4", he's got very long arms, so finding items for him that existed were hard, so we did actually have to build most of his clothes.
Where did you do the building of the clothes? At Goodspeed or in a studio?
There were several makers involved. There was a shop in Atlanta that did a lot of the chorus people, because it's a shop called All Stitch, and they're very good at doing sort of stretch clothing and dance clothing. And then the shop at Goodspeed built a huge amount of the things. They built the jewels, which are would be the most expensive things to shop out. And then they also built the sets of sisters, and they built the cowgirl clothes. So they were extremely, extremely busy, and they had a huge amount on their plate because it's a relatively small shop. And then we had independent makers, I think 4 independent makers who live around Connecticut. And these are people who I know from Yale and from the other theaters. One of them is actually in Providence. And they all took bits and sort of focused on different leads, and and one woman did only the children, and one woman did just the favorite pieces. So it was really sort of farmed out. There was a lot going on in a lot of different areas.
Alona, thanks for joining us. I wish we had more time. I've always wanted to talk to costume designers.
Anytime, Mark.
Yeah, I was a Yale student also, and I remember spending time watching Gene Button work in the costume shop. So I've got a million questions, and I hope you'll come back again at some point. That was Alona Samogi, who designed the costumes for the Will Rogers Follies, currently at Goodspeed. If you're interested in seeing the Will Rogers Follies, it runs through June. They've got a great summer lineup ahead, and you should check them out. We're going to leave you today with the Highline Vocal Jazz, an a cappella group with ties to Connecticut Repertory Theater that I'm just crazy about. So I hope you enjoy their music, and we'll be back with Artsbeat Radio show on the third Wednesday in May before we return to a weekly basis here starting Memorial Day weekend on Friday mornings. I'm Mark Auerbach with Peter Coles in the studio here at 89.5 FM WSKB on the campus of Westfield State University.
I'm so in love with you. Whatever you wanna do is alright with me. You make me feel so brand new. I'll never be untrue.
So come on, darling, let's stay together. I'm loving your weather. Times are good or bad, or happy or sad. Why do people break up, turn around and make up? I just can't see. Let me be the one who come running to. You make me feel so brand new. You make me feel brand new. Let's stay together. I'm loving your weather. Times are good or bad, or happy or sad. Let's stay together. I love you weather. Times are good or bad, or happy or sad.